Science fiction, Blindsight. Written by Peter Watts. On February 13th, 2082, 65,536 extraterrestrial explorers surrounded the Earth. At first they are like countless black holes embedded in the atmosphere, blocking out the sky and covering the sun. Then they fall into the atmosphere together like bright meteors and burn out. This triggered the resonance of all radios on Earth and in geosynchronous orbit. Each infrared telescope can only see the blurred screens. A brief, bright peep from a different creature shocked humanity. People call it firefall. The Earth detects the source of the signal. 3 teams have been sent to the source successively to survey a comet in the Kuiper belt, near Neptune's orbit, called Burns-Caulfield. The first 2 teams were unmanned explorers. As the second unmanned probes were approaching Burns-Caulfield, the artificial instrument buried in the core of the star Caulfield exploded suddenly. 2 months after the firefall, the third probe team, including the protagonist, departed. During their flight, the news of the explosion came to them. The ship changed course to carry the crew to a sub-brown dwarf named Big Ben. At this time, the development of human technology has crossed a singularity. Humans are also gradually coming out of the Earth and start colonizing the solar system. However, the development of technology has not made the world a better place. On the contrary, the outlook for humanity is not good. In these gloomy times, ordinary humans are called baseline humans, who have no productivity and they do not work, have no knowledge and no skills, can but upload their consciousness into the virtual paradise and muddling through. And the virtual paradise here does not only provide sustenance for the residents' brains, but also be nourished from them. Use the excess energy generated by their idling synapses to keep the facility running. Ordinary humans have been completely unable to keep up with the advanced technology. They are no longer able to understand the thinking and reasoning process of a computer. In this highly competitive environment, the people who were still able to work at the time were all modified superhumans, and the quantum computers developed by humans, artificial intelligence. And the crews that consist of this third exploration team were not actually ordinary human. One of them is not even a human at all. The captain of the ship is actually the research vessel itself, Quantum AI, Theseus, and the commander is a vampire. Vampires here are not like those in magical fiction. In the Blindsight setting, vampires are actually a subspecies of prehistoric humans. Due to a genetic error in their visual and sympathetic nerve crossings, in result their brains cannot produce a protein that is exclusive to humans. This has forced this human subspecies to become a cannibalistic monster. And because of this, the brain structure of vampires differs greatly from that of normal people, which gives them access to extraordinary pattern recognition skills and intelligence. But at the same time, they all suffer from a strange disease, vertical syndrome, also called Usled's disease. Once they see a right angle, it triggers epilepsy. And that's exactly why, as mankind enters the Age of Settlement, lots of right angles appeared, and vampires became extinct. And this is why vampires are afraid of the cross. And with the development of technology, people covet the power of vampires. Using advanced genetic technology to bring the species back, anti-Euslidian pumps have been installed in the brains of vampires, and anti-Euslidian drugs have been developed. They use their extraordinary skills to perform a variety of difficult tasks. Other members of the probe team include linguist James. She isolated her brain to split 4 separate personalities that can work together. Also, the biologist Spindle. She dug out his ears, nose, mouth, and eyes and voluntarily installed a bunch of sensory extension devices. She can see ultraviolet and infrared rays, and hear ultrasound and infrasound. She can feel the taste of the cells and taste the shape of the data. She's able to taste various chemicals like dessert, but at the cost of almost total loss of control over her own body. Also a military expert who can connect his consciousness to the fighting machine at any time. It's a super soldier like in the game. There are a variety of enhanced capabilities. The last crew member is the protagonist of Blindsight, the recorder and observer, Katon. He is also the narrator of the whole story. Katon suffered from epilepsy as a child, so at the age of 8, semi-cutting surgery of the brain was performed. This turned him into an emotionless loner. He has no emotions to empathize with others. So, under the arrangement of parents, he received physical enhancements, acquired the ability to communicate with ordinary humans and various superhumans. He was able to record and integrate the actions of the superhumans in extremely complex events. This allows him to write reports to let the boss understand what they are doing. The probe team has been flying for more than a decade in dormant. In the process, the spaceship AI Theseus discovers that the possible location of the aliens is not their original destination, the Kuiper belt. So, without informing the probe team in the frozen state, it changed course on its own, heading for the home of alien life. This is a Jupiter-sized star, existing between Saturn and the Oort cloud. It never shines because it's too far from the sun. It never releases any electromagnetic signal to the outside world. Therefore, it's been ignored by humans for so long. The exploration team called it Big Ben. In the course of their exploration, they discovered a satellite orbiting Big Ben. What is surprising is that this satellite has intelligence. Linguists began to actively communicate with it. This satellite calls itself Rorschach. Rorschach seems to know humans very well, but when the probe team proposed a close encounter, Rorschach first refused with the excuse of excessively radioactive environment, and when the probe team insisted on making contact, Rorschach even appeared a little fearful. Communication with the detection team was then shut down. The exploration team found that Rorschach's way of communication clearly defies the basic logic of human linguistics, and the origin of the name Rorschach is just imitating the name of an ordinary human spacecraft in near-Earth orbit. Combined with the previous incident to firefall, it made the team suspicious. Is it because Rorschach sent a large number of detectors to Earth and acquired a great number of information about the Earth? So Rorschach doesn't have intelligence at all. It's simply imitating human speech. The probe team is forced to land on Rorschach out of curiosity. They found that the interior of the Rorschach was as winding and twisting as a tunnel. Out of order, yet it seems to follow some unified theory. They move along the tunnels, sending sound to each tunnel and mapping it into a 3D model for analysis and study. But just in the process of exploring, team members began to appear one after another a variety of terrible hallucinations. After a painful struggle, the reason for this is that it turns out that Rorschach's internal magnetic field can produce a strong impact on the brainwaves of the team members. The team has no choice but to withdraw first. But what the probe team doesn't know is Rorschach is a bizarre being with extreme intelligence and yet no awareness. He has no nervous system, no self-awareness, and can't think. It is capable of efficient metabolism and self-reproduction based on a few simple physical laws, and provides complex and sophisticated feedback to the outside world. He was even able to master human language without being aware of it, and communicating verbally with the probe team members. The incomprehensible and indescribable life form gave the crew of the Theseus a dangerous misdirection. By default, Rorschach is considered a highly intelligent extraterrestrial civilization trying to establish communication with other civilizations, which all means including peaceful and violent ones. But the fact is that Rorschach is just a piece of meat with a high degree of intelligence, senselessly mobilizing the entire body's immune system, preparing to destroy the Theseus, which is considered a germ that has broken into its interior. To find out what's going on, the probe team cannot retreat. They entered the interior of Rorschach several more times and were surprised to find Rorschach's interior is actually inhabited by life forms that has the ability of cloaking. The exploration team named the life form the Scramblers. This is a carbon-based organism that relies on magnetic fields to determine its location. There are hundreds of thousands of eyes on the body, each of which can be focused independently. The whole body is like a scattered retina, and there's a vision-related pigment cell under each eye. It can diffuse or shrink with substances in the environment. This dynamic pigmentation pattern is like a squid or a chameleon. Under the leadership of Captain Vampire, the team captures and studies several scramblers. They found out the reason why this cunning alien creature can be invisible is using the blindness phenomenon of humans, also known as the eye movement mechanism. They move only during the window of time when human eye movements produce information, thus achieving the purpose of stealth. The human oculomotor mechanism refers to what we can see is only the angle that the eye aims at. Everything else is just a blur on the edge. It's just light and movement. Movement will attract the attention of the eye, and one's eyes are always shifting. Medically, this is called eye movement. It makes the image blurry. If the movement is too fast for the brain to integrate, the human eye simply shuts down between pauses. The eye can only catch a freeze frame picture, but your brain edits out the blanks, then sews these freeze frames together to form a continuous illusion. The team found that the Scramblers have extremely strong abilities to detect, analyze, and store signals, but not self-recognition. Scramblers can recognize temperature, humidity, brightness, electromagnetic radiation, sound waves, and all the other signals you can imagine. But they can't recognize their own kind, because Scramblers have no genes at all, just like the sunflower kind of form, purely determined by physics. The Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean can be found everywhere in nature. None of these are determined by genetic code, but the interaction of mechanics. For example, embryos, when to start growing and when to stop. It depends on the genes. The number of finger bones or vertebrae is the result of cells colliding with each other, but the role of genes is only in establishing the starting state that makes the process possible. The growth of structures after that point does not require specific instructions. This is a typical spontaneous molding phenomenon. So Rorschach and the Scramblers is like the relationship between the hive and the bees. How bees can build a perfect hexagonal hive? Is it because the bees have the geometric knowledge to construct a square hexagon? Obviously not. It is because the instructions of the honeybee hive are present in the nerves. Their neural commands prompt them to chew beeswax and squeeze it to form hexagons. And this shape also happens to be more space-saving. Rorschach and the Scramblers also have a symbiotic relationship, like Theseus and the probe team. But unlike this, Rorschach is the bee and the Scramblers are the hive. Rorschach is the dominant player. Rorschach's magnetic field is not an anti-invasion mechanism at all. Rather, they are part of their life support system. A large part of the Scramblers' metabolism is regulated by it. Just after the probe team and its members had thought hard about finally realizing that alien life does not need the function of self-identification, let alone the ability to empathize. For extraterrestrial life, precious energy should not be wasted, and the human race are releasing electromagnetic signals all over the universe, such as television and radio. These signals would require alien life to consume energy to analyze and summarize. In fact, it makes no sense for their survival. For extraterrestrial life, this is simply a behavior like virus. And the linguist's enthusiastic tone of voice communication is also considered by alien life to be wasting energy necessary for their survival with meaningless information. Now war is on the horizon, and the Theseus is only a probe ship, which is not equipped with many combat weapons. It's far from being able to fight directly with Rorschach. However, the Theseus was still hit by Rorschach, and that's when the probe team conspired to attack Katon because of the difference in philosophy, as Katon's inability to empathize with his own kind while others think they can because they have humanity. The conspired attack provokes Katon's anger. He finally understands the meaning of humanity, thus realizing that humanity is useless for the survival of mankind. Perhaps this is something the rest of the probe team realized long ago. The radio waves Rorschach sent to the Theseus's crew interfered with the mechanical soldiers, and also implanted a fifth personality to the linguist, causing linguist to switch the medicine that the commander vampire used to deal with the right angles, which trigger epilepsy on vampire and eventually killed by mechanical guards. Moment of crisis. The rest of the probe team decided to use antimatter bombs to die with Rorschach, and before the explosion, Katon was sent back to the Earth with a lifeboat, because only Katon can use completely objective and credible language to inform the human race on Earth of the fact that humanity is completely meaningless to human existence. In the long time it took for the lifeboat to return to the Earth, Katon gradually discovered that in the electromagnetic signals emitted from the Earth, emotional, artistic content is becoming less and less. Finally, only the traffic signal remains. This means humans have also discovered that human beings often mistakenly think that they were able to understand others correctly because of their empathy. But the fact is that empathy simply creates more misunderstanding and strife, so humans began to give up the empathy of their own kind, and chose to rely entirely on hyper-enhanced intelligence. And with it, the humanity that wastes energy is lost, superpowered but with no humanity. In other words, all humans have evolved into vampires. Peter Watts is a biologist. He created Blindsight with his profound knowledge and superb writing skills. However, due to the high reading barrier of this book, it was rejected by several publishers initially. As a result, the desperate Watts had to post the novel entirely on his website, free to the world. As people began to discuss it in small circles, more and more people realized that this is a rare classic science fiction masterpiece. Virtual reality, artificial intelligence, space technology were involved in Blindsight, as well as biological pathology, linguistics, neurology, psychology, sociology, and philosophical scope of the topic. Obscure and difficult to understand at first reading, thought-provoking after reading. For example, what is the ultimate direction of human evolution? The next step in this highly competing society where technology is advancing at a rapid pace, modification of human beings itself will be inevitable. This also deserves our deep thoughts, as in the present society we can have cosmetic surgery to become beautiful. To treat myopia, we can wear glasses or have corneal surgery. How is this not a modification? In a sense, modification is the same as evolution. Is such a society good or bad for human beings? Perhaps here we must admit, in order to survive in the universe, we must continue to evolve and adapt. What is the role of self-awareness in the evolution of human beings? It is written in the book that, do you want to know what consciousness is for? Do you want to know what its only real use is? Children learn to ride a bicycle with an auxiliary wheel and that's it. You can't see both sides of the Necker cube at the same time. So it helps you to focus on one of them and forget about the other. Evolution does not have foresight. Complex structures have their own plans. The brain, it likes to cheat. Feedback loops were evolved to enhance the stability of the heartbeat, but they are unintentionally tempted by the rhythm in music. Fractal images trigger euphoria, which is algorithms summarized for habitat selection. Finally, all of them are transformed into art. The excitement that once could only be won by increasing adaptability gradually, nowadays it is possible to get from the meaningless introspection. Beauty is spontaneously produced from uncountable dopamine receptors. The system is no longer satisfied with shaping the body. It begins the process of shaping this shaping. It keeps consuming more and more computing resources. Block yourself with endless recursion and irrelevant simulations, just like cancer DNA. It survives and reproduces. It produces nothing but itself. Meta-process blooms like cancer. They wake up and call themselves I, as if Peter Watts had given us the answer and asked us new questions at the same time. For example, the Chinese house mentioned in the article. An example of a so-called Chinese house. In a small house, you are a Westerner who does not know Chinese. There will be a small window outside handing in some pieces of paper with strange patterns on them. Your job is to translate the pattern into English and reply according to the rules based on a manual at hand. Then follow the rules to combine the responses into another pattern written on a piece of paper and hand it out. These patterns are actually Chinese. To people on the outside, it looks like you are answering questions in Chinese. And in fact, you don't know Chinese at all. The main character Katon has no empathic ability though, but he has an amazing ability to integrate and record. He's like a particularly large database that can react accordingly and correctly according to the events. If we really have this ability one day, are we considered to have the ability to empathize or not? To have humanity? Also, Rorschach's name is not randomly chosen. It comes from the Rorschach ink blot test of psychology. Subjects looked at a series of pictures made up of ink blots to describe what they saw, and in their eyes, the image represented by the ink blot illustrates their mental activity. The alien intelligence picked such a name from Earth's leaked airwaves. The implication is probably that they are just a mirror. So, do humans' long-standing observations of extraterrestrial intelligence merely reflect their own perceptions? Classical philosophical metaphors about Theseus' spaceship. If the wood on Theseus' ship is gradually replaced until all the wood is not the original wood, is this ship the same as the original one? All the main characters in the novel, including the spaceship itself, have been modified. So, can a modified human still be considered human?